Warriors, we are going to start off today by saying that Jayne Bigelsen is joining me here, and we have a little construction going on. We're both in New York City, and that's what happens here. So if you hear a little drilling, a little noise, a little scaffolding fall over, just adds to the excitement of what we're talking about.
And we're
So
warriors, so we can worry through
and we're
anything.
warriors. So Jayne and I do not let a little noise stop us because we have
Exactly.
such important messaging to share with you. Jayne Bigelsen is joining us, and she is the Chief Policy Officer, Women's Justice Now, National Organization for Women, New York City. Jayne has a storied career. We don't even have time to go through her tremendous background that includes law, communications, nonprofit management, and public policy. She has dedicated her life. She is such an advocate. She has one goal: to assist vulnerable populations, including homeless youth, survivors of human trafficking, sexual assault, and intimate partner violence, helping everybody find their way to freedom. Jayne has been instrumental in helping me at the Warriors understand the pressing issues and what I can share with you, the public, what we urge all of you to get on board with. And you have to know about, because a lot of media doesn't cover it. But Jayne is going to fill us in today. You can follow Jayne. She's on LinkedIn. You can also go nownewyorkcity.org is the website. Also, equalitymodelnewyork.org. We're going to get into all of this. Welcome, Jayne. I'm going to say back to the Warriors because we work together. We have spoken before, and I'm just honored you're taking the time today because I know your schedule that you're joining me.
Yes, and I'm just always so grateful for the work that you do for getting, we're all in the nitty gritty, but you make sure that the public understands what we're doing. So,
I mean, absolutely. I want to jump right in. Now,
great.
before we start, though, we're, as I mentioned, in New York City, New York State. Describe your job right now, what you're doing.
Well, so it's a new job that I only started in January, and it's varied. Some of it is just educating about domestic violence, sexual assaults, human trafficking. I'm starting to raise money to bring a survivor leaders program where survivors can help with that education and also get paid to do that. It's just so important that they get skills, right? Public speaking skills, writing skills. I've got former survivor leaders from my old job. One's working full time at a city council office. The other two are applying for college. Wait, one is like just crushed her first semester of college, now in her second semester.
Wow.
So I'm trying to raise money to start that program again. But I also do spend some time getting some of the laws changed that are currently very harmful for women and girls. So I put together a legislative advocacy plan as well.
You're a warrior. Don't be so shy about yourself, Jayne. And you come from Covenant House. When you were at Covenant House, we spoke about that and your tremendous work there. Also, we know the survivor voice, that we have to learn from them. We have to hear from them. We have to take care of them, and they have to be paid. You're a tremendous mentor. I like that because I think there's a lack of mentorship. So we are on board with you. This is exactly what is needed to affect change. Now, let's get into New York State.
Wait, before we get to the law real quick, that is a really important point that most programs that serve survivors have like 6 months of aftercare services. That is not enough, right? That's just not. During COVID, I heard from survivors that I had worked with years ago saying, oh my God, I lost my job. I'm going to be evicted. What am I going to do? Like for the first time since getting out of this life, that's what they call the life of prostitution. Like I'm, my daddy, my pimp's calling me because he somehow heard I'm going to be evicted. And the first time in years, I'm like, might have to take a date. That's what they say when they go back into the life. So survivors need a place that they can go to at any point past their exploitation for services. And one of the bills that or the main bill we're going to be talking about does mention services, but that is a separate passion project of my mind, making sure that there's aftercare services and some sort of scholarship program for survivors. There used to be many for college scholarships, and now I'm not finding very many. So both of those are things that this summer I'm going to really commit to finding some resources for, so the survivors that we work with can go to college and can have a safety net long after their exploitation. And I'm sorry for cutting you off. Okay.
No, you're not cutting me off. It's all about your voice. I actually have to tamp it down, because like I have so many questions for you, and I want to hear from you, and our warriors want to hear from you. I mean, you are the expert in this, boots on the ground. I just never understand, Jayne. I have to be honest with you. To really make change, it's exactly what you just described. It has to be resources for survivors. It has to be education. It has to be a place to live. They have to know that they don't have to go on those dates. And we don't have enough of this at all. And I don't understand why, because this is what makes the difference. This is what makes the change. And I know everybody's overwhelmed in their world right now and other issues. But I got to tell you, Jayne, I'm tired of it. These are people.
Me too.
And this is no way for girls and women, boys and men too, to be treated, that we allow this, and also what, just let me just throw in, like, what are our children and teens witnessing? Like in the society, like this is not right. So I commend you. And I think the pendulum's going to start swinging a little bit back, because it cannot keep on with what's happening,
I hope so. I mean, I think it's always hard work, but this is one of the times where I actually am finding it more difficult than ever. Partly, the nonprofit fundraising sector, like, thinks of us like ice cream or products, like they're things that are hot at the moment, right? Like, so for a while, domestic violence and trafficking was hot. Well, now it's not hot anymore. Now climate change and other issues are hot. And like, all of those issues are all important all of the time. So like, why they can decide, okay, we're focusing right now on climate change and racial justice. And like a few years ago, we were focusing on gender-based violence. Like, no, we have to focus on all of them all of the time. And they all intersect. And this idea that some of them are hot for a moment, we're not ice cream. We're helping people. We're helping society that has all of these problems all of the time.
But Jayne, who's making them hot? Do we just think the narrative is put out there and then it just explodes, like the media pushes it and different groups that are well-funded push it? Because you pointed out all of these issues intersect. I always like to say it's kind of a big wheel with like all these spokes, but they're all making this wheel go around together. Exactly. So what is it? You think the media pushes the narrative along with the well-funded groups? Because I want to know, we got to become the well-funded groups.
That's a good point.
I just throw that out there.
I don't know. Some of it definitely is the media, for sure.
Yeah.
And then, then narratives get, I mean, particularly in this age of TikTok, like narratives get out there where like, okay, women and girls are fine now. Time to move on. The LGBT community needs our help now. Like, no, they both always, they both all need help all of the time. Until there's like full equality and violence against no one, there really isn't, like, I guess, when there's limited resources, you put disadvantaged groups, pitting against each other, which is a game that I won't play with. Yes. But a lot of funders, and one of the biggest funders that was funding programs, I won't name them, but if they're watching this, I hope they hear, one of the biggest funders, for funding programs for women and girls, pulled out of this space, leaving lots of grantees in really bad shape. They were funding, programs that helped protect against violence against women and girls. And that is not a cool topic right now. I think, the reproductive right stuff is a cool topic. The, trans women is a cool topic. I think people think that we've solved domestic violence, rape, and a sexual assault. We have not. We have not solved we've helped many people through the years. We've gotten laws changed to help people. But until there are no more victims, I always say I'd love to be out of a job. I would love for my work not to be needed. I would love for there to be no more homeless youth and no more victims of gender-based violence. But I don't see that happening in my lifetime. And so we just need to keep fighting on all of these issues. And let's stop putting people against each other, because as you say, they intersect, like the migrant crisis. Well, a lot of those migrant youth now are being, a lot of the young women are female identified, are being trafficked, right? Like these issues, A lot of trans young women, a lot of trans migrant young women are being trafficked. So they all intersect. And deciding that one group, needs help over another is absolutely insane. Sorry, you got me on a soapbox, but I guess
no. That's why I love talking to you. But also, like, that narrative is put out there about all this. And I will just throw in, no matter what anybody thinks about the border, I do work with law enforcement, and these women and girls in particular coming across the border are in this debt bondage.
Yep.
Jayne. So they think maybe they're paying the cartels or family
Yep.
members, or putting all their monies together, borrowing money, sending them here for a better life. The difference between the migration, from what I'm told from law enforcement, it used to be you pay your X amount of dollars, you get here, you're sort of left alone. No, I'm just sort of generalizing now. But now the common practice is, even when you get here, which these poor people don't know about, they're forcing the women and girls into sex trafficking, and then saying, we will murder your family members back home. So you can never get out of this debt bondage. You are stuck the rest of your life. I find this the most horrific thing that barely anybody is talking about. If we know about it, we have to all talk about it. The media won't touch it. And these women, girls, men and boys too, they're never going to get away. It is disgusting. Well, we're going to be changing the narrative. Now, I want to go in our beautiful home state of New York. What's the landscape right now, Jayne, happening with the sex trade in New York State?
I mean, I know more about the legislative landscape. But
well, we're going to go into that. Here's how you should answer that, Jayne. Not that I should tell you what to say.
No, tell me, please.
It's exploding.
Yes, it is.
And that's the answer. And now we go into why.
It is. Yes.
Why? That's it.
I have not spent as much time as my colleagues. Like, I have colleagues who go out to the track, and that's what we call where people, mostly women, are being sold for prostitution in their cars, all around them. I'm planning to go in June, but I have not been out yet. But what I'm hearing from anyone who has gone is it's exploding with younger and younger women. I do know from my days at working in a homeless youth shelter that, for whatever reason, COVID set off, exponentially increased the number of cars that were outside trying to recruit homeless youth into prostitution. So it really is, exploding. And there's a lot of press articles too, saying that it's exploding all over New York State. You and I, Lynn, we tend to think New York City, but, they're big, Buffalo, Rochester, you name it, right? There's prostitution and trafficking happen everywhere, and it is exploding.
And it's a good indicator we can just throw in across our country, right, Jayne? That this is, because we're here focused on this. But I like to always say that really all of this is happening in every town, city, and rural area in one way or another across America. And that is why it's so important to talk about this legislation. First of all, the equality model. Tell us what the equality model is.
First, I want to go. Sorry, I never answer exactly your question.
No, don't be sorry. Neither do I. I jump all over the place. That's why we're well suited for each other.
But I want to answer a question before of why I think it's exploding. There is this movement, and which is going to get us directly to the equality model, because the equality model is against this movement. There is this idea, particularly among younger people, that sex work is work and it's a victimless crime. And therefore law enforcement in a lot of places have said, okay, we hear you. We're going to stay out of prostitution. It's a victimless crime. And you've got pimps now telling their victims, hey, it's not illegal anymore, which is not true. But that's what they're saying. Or the police are going to stay away from it because it's a victimless crime. So go out and make more money for you. So this mantra of sex work is work, which is coming primarily from younger people, and people who call themselves progressive, which breaks my heart because I consider myself to be a progressive, but this is a form of progressiveness that I want no part of. But that is creating this kind of open free-for-all for prostitution. And whenever you have an open free-for-all for prostitution, you increase human trafficking exponentially. And I can explain why a little later. First, though, let me tell you a little bit about this equality model legislation. It is a New York State bill. It is sponsored by Assembly Member Pam Hunter in the Assembly, and Senator Liz Krueger, really powerhouse, wonderful sponsors. She's in the New York State Senate. I don't know why I can't speak today, Lynn, but I think I'm just so
I got you all riled up and heated
you
up.
got me all riled up. I'm like ready to like scream from the rooftop, and then that trips me up. But so this bill, though, what does it do? It really, the focus is on helping survivors, right? By, instead of arresting them and putting them in jail, getting them the services they need, right? We don't arrest domestic violence clients. We don't arrest and prosecute any other victims. So why should we be arresting, survivors of human trafficking in the sex trade? What they do need, however, is services, right? So this bill stops arresting people who are victims, but instead continues to arrest the people who are doing the harm, the sex buyers, the pimps, the promoters. It adds fines for the sex buyers. And the fines are on a sliding, like based on your income, right? We heard the feedback that we don't want like people in poverty paying, higher prices. We want law enforcement to go after like the Jeffrey Epsteins of the world. So the fines are higher, the higher your income is. And here's the beauty of it, though. Those fines then go back to survivors. I think 50% go directly to survivors, and then 50% go to social service providers. You could correct me on the math, but that's what I'm thinking. That's about right, that they go both to social service providers,
yes,
and directly to survivors. And with that, the social service providers can make sure that, they're encouraging law enforcement to arrest those pimps, arrest those sex buyers. These are the people who are hurting the most vulnerable among us. But making sure that the survivors get the resources they need. It is so similar to domestic violence, right? A lot of the young people I work with were traumatically bonded to their abuser. I mean, Lynn, it would break my heart. I know you've heard it from me many times, but it's because it's like singed in my brain. One young person told me that her pimp was the first person to ever give her a birthday cake, right? Another young person, an adult survivor, not a client, told me that the first person to ever give her a hug was her pimp, right? So they alternate often from this like pretend love and affection that the young people I work with so desperately craved to beating the crap up out of them the next day. And so often my clients didn't even realize they were victims, right? They thought that like they were in love with this person. This person was their everything. And it would often take years of therapy for them to come back to me and say, you know what, Miss Jayne, I kept telling you this is my choice. I want to be a, quote unquote, I want to be a sex worker. This is my choice. It's my body. But, after some therapy, they're like, wait a second, he was beating the crap out of me. What choice did I really have? But do you want to put that person in jail? No. You want to get them mental health care. You want to get them medical care. You want to get them a place to live, right? Anything that, putting handcuffs on them, getting them through the criminal justice system just sets them back, right? Makes them afraid of law enforcement. So years down the road, they often do want to see their persecutor, off the street. It takes many years because they need to be like themselves in a mentally safe place. But if they've had a really bad experience with that beat cop who's like arrested them and thrown them in jail, they're a lot less likely to feel comfortable with going to law enforcement to see their abusers put in jail. So no reason to arrest them. They do not need, handcuffs. They need housing. So this bill says that you do not arrest people sold for sex. You offer them services, but you keep the penalties on buyers and pimps, and you have fines that pay for the services. That's the equality model.
Well, Jayne, I almost cried for a minute when you were talking because it makes such perfect sense, the equality model. Throwing people in jail, many have reported to me, they're just thrown in or pressed constantly, like who, to get to the drug dealer, because we know in these situations they try to get them, and they do most of the time, to commit other crimes and things like that. And they will say to me like, I know you know better, but like nobody cared about me. this is another problem with society. Like when you said never had a birthday cake, how horrible is this? So that goes to like the homes they're in. Another difficult uh, problem, with foster care and foster youth and I, Jayne, personally have not met, this is the truth, an adult, they could be my age, who they don't know each other. They've said to me, Jayne, they re-victimized me, they re-traumatized me. This is getting back to a quality model. This doesn't go away. This is like a lifelong trauma that needs to be dealt with very carefully.
Yeah.
And with lots of compassion and love, not just throwing people that may be considered, throwaway people. I've actually had that said to me. Like,
Yeah.
why are you so concerned? These are throwaway people. Okay.
Oh my God. And I've seen
had that said to me, Jayne. So,
oh my God, I'd want to, that just, throttle that person. I've seen the other side of that. I see when you give someone care and resources and point out their strengths and their skills, they shine.
yeah.
Sometimes it could take some time, but what former survivors are doing, they're the ones changing the world. They just need someone to believe in them, and they need to believe in themselves, but they can't do that without access to the right, without having a safe place to stay.
A safe space and somebody who gives them that little pat on the back. I just have to relay with you because I actually think of her every day. Unfortunately, she died a few months back, but she was here in New York on the track for 10 years, from 14 to 24. And when I got to know her, I was speaking to her, I said, what after 10 years? And of course, the pimp got her addicted to drugs, and
that's what they do.
10 years. The difference, I said, what made you? What was that light bulb moment? Is because she went to the old, remember St. Vincent's? It's no longer here. The hospital was downtown in the village. She had some kind of infection or something like that. And she walked in, she said, like in the middle of the night, there's nobody around. And that used to be a small hospital downtown. And she said there was nobody there but one nurse who put a blanket around her, made her a cup of tea, and said, looked in her eyes. And she said, that's her light bulb moment, that this woman, after 10 years and all this addiction and this beatings and all, and she said, somebody cares for me. And that little bit of a blanket and a cup of tea gave her the power to get out of it. And it was just, lifelong medical traumas with her body, her brain, psychologically. I think the public also doesn't understand. I've had many people say to me, well, they could just walk away. They're psychologically damaged, beaten down, walk away to what? Where are they going to go live? How are they going to eat?
And they have no resources, and they have nowhere to go. And
that's just it. And I'm like, where are they walking? Oh, well, I would walk away. Yeah. Where would you walk away? You could even have a child in the background or something like that, that you have to provide for. You're not walking anywhere. You're staying wherever. You're in that moment. How I can keep a roof over my head, how I can eat a hamburger. Like, you can't think like that. So that's where like a lot of the training and raising awareness has to come in. I also want to point out, Jayne, everything we talk about is bipartisan. These are human rights abuses. We have to get on board. Everybody has to come together and say, we're not having any of this. Tell us about New Yorkers for the Equality Model.
Yeah, we're trying to get the bill that we just talked about passed. We've gotten Lobby Day in Albany coming up. It's the most common sense legislation that, it makes so much sense. We, just like everybody else in this world, I think we get hurt a little bit by disinformation. I don't know if you want me to talk at all about that.
A little bit.
Some people see it as like, oh my God, that's the first step to decriminalizing prostitution. It is not. It's exact opposite of that. In fact, we want some of that money to go to nonprofits to work with law enforcement, to encourage law enforcement to arrest these buyers and arrest these pimps so that, there's more money, more funding for services. And you don't need to arrest the victim. Again, we don't arrest domestic violence victims. If you're living like right now, Lynn, you and I were talking about before the show started that open air, like prostitution markets are popping up all across New York State. If you don't want that in your neighborhood, go after the pimps, go after the sex buyers, right? The women, there's nothing, right? The victims are not going to be out there if no one's forcing them to be out there, and there's no one willing to buy their services. So if you want those to go away, you want the equality model, right? You want to go after the buyers. I always say when it comes to human trafficking, let's think about this for a minute. There would be no human trafficking if there were no sex buyers, right? So if we crack down on sex buyers, there will be less human trafficking. Unfortunately, the alternative is true. The more sex buyers, the more human trafficking. So there is a movement, mostly by younger people, who are saying sex work is work. They want to fully decriminalize prostitution. That is not a good idea, because what that does is it expands the sex trade. It gets more sex buyers. And when there's more sex buyers, there's more human trafficking. Should I go a little bit into like why that works, or do you think?
Yeah, I want you to share, because we, and there's no accountability. So everybody's got, so people who normally wouldn't, I mean, I don't mean to step on your words, Jayne, but like people who normally wouldn't try something like this, or say, okay, because we know the ages are getting younger and younger. Okay, it'd be okay to go after a 14-year-old perhaps, or something like that. So yes, speak upon that. We need the reality and the truths out there.
Okay. So there is this movement, sex workers work. You'll hear it a lot on college campus, which is this goal to just fully decriminalize prostitution. It's based off of, I think they mean well, but they're just misinformed. I think they think that they're they are separate things, but they're completely related. And that is consensual sexual, like, activity, I guess, commercial sexual activity, right? Two consenting adults, one decides to pay each other, right? They see that over here, and then they say human trafficking over here, and that they're not at all related. And so we can therefore make this legal. We can make the two consenting adults legal while keeping the trafficking illegal, right? That's what they truly believe. Maybe in a perfect world, but in the world that we live in, that's not the case. What happens, right? So what they want to do is they want to fully decriminalize the sex trade, and they put forward legislation that does just that. And they cross out the crime of selling sex, like we do, but they also cross out the crime of buying sex, of promoting sex. So what do you think happens? The number of sex buyers explodes. Let me explain this. Yes, there will be some people who will always buy sex. They don't care if it's illegal. They just will. They're just sex buyers, right? And then there's another group of people that will never buy sex because they love their significant other. They just don't believe in it, and they won't do it. But there's a third group of people who aren't doing it, but would do it if it was decriminalized and destigmatized. Here, I want to bring in the marijuana example. I don't like to do that because I don't like comparing marijuana and people, because in the marijuana reign, no one is getting hurt, right, for the most part. And in prostitution, people who are selling their bodies are getting hurt. But the one way that analogy works is, I'm gonna throw my mother under the table. I don't think she'll mind. She's 88 years old. She loves her marijuana gummies. Okay, a couple of years ago, she never had a marijuana gummy in her life. But now that it's been decriminalized, she loves it. She's not the only one. Like, right? All of a sudden, all these people who've never tried marijuana in their life are using it. That's the same thing that every country research shows on sex buying, right? You decriminalize it, all of a sudden you have all of these sex buyers. And then they're going to come and they're going to find their way to New York where it's legal, right? And they're going to start having XXX things in Times Square and in all across New York City or wherever it's legal. And yes, there will be some consensual sex workers who will be, that's the term that they use, not my colleagues, but yes, there'll be some people consensually in the sex trade, and they'll make more money, and that'll be great. But there's not enough of them. So you think those pimps and promoters are going to leave that money on the table? No, they're going to stand outside the youth shelters in our city and the foster group homes, and they're wherever, and they're going to create recruiting centers across the street from youth homeless shelters. And they are going to bring all of these people into the sex trade that weren't there before. Now you can say this is all hyperbole and exaggeration, but I tell you, I live it. Like I wasn't, 12 years ago before I just started my last job, I was on the fence of this issue. I wasn't 100% sure what I believed, but working at a youth homeless shelter, I saw how the pimps were outside our building. And whenever people talk about sex work is work, all of a sudden they got more sex buyers, so they got to get more girls. They're not waiting outside of universities. They're not waiting outside of major elite universities. These pimps are waiting outside of Covenant House. They're waiting outside of child welfare group homes. So someone decided sex work is work is progressive.
Yeah.
But I don't know where the idea of wealthy men, more likely white men, with money to spare, buying poor young women, primarily brown and black women, who decided that was progressive? I don't get it. I really don't get it. And every study, except for maybe one in New Zealand, and that's the one that full decrim people always cite, but every other study around the world shows that when you decriminalize prostitution expands, and so does human trafficking exponentially. I mean, even if you look at it, I'm not a global expert. You need to have our colleague Taina on to talk like global experts, but not even being an expert. If you've ever been to Amsterdam and you see those women in the red light district, they're not educated Dutch women, because no educated Dutch woman wants to do it, right? But now you got all this, it's decriminalized. So you got all these men from all over the world coming there to buy sex. We don't have women who want to do it. So what do? We recruit the poorest of the poor from Eastern Europe. We bring them here. Maybe they're not trafficked, but once they're in those windows, what are they going to do? They don't have a way out, right? Once you're in the sex trade, it is really hard to get out. So why do we want to expand the sex trade? We also know, some of the full decrim folks say that decriminalizing it will make it safer. Decriminalizing the seller will make it safer, because now that seller can go to the police when before they were afraid. And that's exactly what the equality model does. But how does decriminalizing the buyer and the pimp make it safer? They have this dream of destigmatizing it. And I get it. I see why they want it. But if you've ever looked at any of the John boards, and yes, they have John boards. That's where people rate, just like Yelp. This is where they rate people in prostitution, rate them after they've raped them. And the things they say, they're comparing women to pizzas and to products, and give her an extra star because she was okay with a little violence. Give her an extra star because she wouldn't use a condom. Is that what we want for our young women? Is that the world that we want? And the power for some of the sex buyers, the brutality is part of the fun.
Good. I've been waiting for you to get to the brutality. It is brutal.
Brutality is part of the fun, and you cannot legislate that away. If anything, having more of a sex trade means you bring more of them here. But the brutality is part of the fun. It's not just the sex. It's buying another person and then feeling like you can make them do whatever you want them to do. That's part of the fun, and you cannot destigmatize that away. I'm not going to say they're all like that, but a
large majority, right?
Right, a large majority. The violence is part of the fun, and you could say, oh well, it's decriminalized, so she'll be safe now. Well, I don't know if it means she's going to get a 2-star review instead of a 5-star review because she wasn't okay with a little violence, and her boss isn't going to be so happy. How's that going to work? Right. You just can't destigmatize that violence away. No. And then you also, I heard our colleague Taina just say this recently too. It also sets the whole cultural tone of it's okay to buy a woman and that a woman has a price tag on it. I say woman, it's also men. It's also, some particularly LGBT men, but it sets the stage that someone's got a price tag on them. So the next morning, if a man is at work and there's their Uber driver is a woman or their waitress is a woman, are they not thinking in their head like, ooh, does she have a price tag on her too? I don't know, but I think when you get used to purchasing women, I think that could happen. But
Jayne, we know. I mean, you open my mind up to so many things. How this is progressive is beyond how anybody can even think this. It's ridiculous. I mean, it is not. These are crimes. We know where the studies, where it's been legalized, and I get my information from you and from, Coalition Against Trafficking in Women. It doesn't work. It's just more women, more girls to fill, men and boys too, to fill the sex buying. We also, I want to go back and just reiterate, because it's reported to me, it's not, just people having sex. It is brutal because our culture today, our society, we have really, in my opinion, just normalized everything sexual, right? Whether it's the entertainment, it's the music business, it's all. And I remember those quotes when we did the lobby day. We had a package last time we went and it had the quotes in it to show. Do you remember that, Jayne? Like, and I was shocked the way they're taught. Like, I couldn't even read them because it really made my stomach like turn. I remember thinking, oh, it's bad enough you do it. And then you're on boards talking about it, this one, that one. And I want to know, Jayne, I know we're working on it. A lot of good women and men are working on this. But like I'm older than you are, but like I was at that tail end of that women's movement. Like, as a kid, I remember all these women, really feminists, like coming together, every color, every religion, equal wages, all this stuff. And like, I want to know why women, they're not coming out now. I mean it, like protesting in Times Square. We cannot allow, because you mentioned something. I have had more women across the country report to me trying to make money. They drove Ubers or they were delivering Domino's pizzas. I'm going to just throw it out there to make money for their kids, for themselves. They're in college. And men, I'm telling you, would always, hey, do you want to get together? Hey, what if I pay you? Constantly, I have heard this story. Again, women who don't know each other. So we know it's happening.
Yep. And the more we tell people sex workers work, the more you're going to hear.
That's what I'm trying to share. Like, and so where is everybody fighting this? This is disgusting that our little girls and boys, are going to grow up and think, okay, it'll be okay to be in the window in Times Square in a couple of years, waiting for people to bid on me.
And if it's work like any other work, where's your 401k? Where's your sick days? Where's any sort of autonomy? It's not work like any other work. It's exploitation. It's like, we have this great video, Can Money Buy Consent? Like it can't, right? It can't. You're forcing someone to do something that they don't want to do. That's not consent because there's money involved. A few other points. This one breaks my heart. People are saying that sex workers work and fully decriminalizing prostitution is the right thing to do for the LGBT community. And there's a little bit of a divide among people who call themselves progressives about that because they're us. Like me, I consider myself a progressive, and I think that's the stupidest statement I've ever heard. But where is that divide coming from? I think some of it is if you have middle-aged, people in the sex trade, right, who are identifying themselves as sex workers, I can kind of see, right, why they would benefit from full decrim. They're 40-something years old, right? They're not going to do anything else with their life at this point. So they want more sex buyers, right? The more sex buyers are, the more money they can make, maybe the more choice they could have. I could see why those individuals want it. But unfortunately, our law doesn't say, okay, it's okay for you, but it's not okay for you, right? Instead, it just says these things are no longer a crime. And what if you're an 18-year-old trans kid, right? The young people that I worked with in my prior work with young people experiencing homelessness, they can be anything they want to be, right? They can be doctors and social workers and lawyers, and they can be anything they want to be. And I don't want them walking by a recruitment center that's across from the homeless youth shelter that's telling them, sex work is the best thing for you, because
Yes.
on a day that they're feeling desperate, they might go ahead and go in. And once you get in the sex trade, it is so hard to get out because of what it does to you mentally, right? I heard this through, I worked with kids who were identified as survivors of trafficking, and I work with kids who told me that they were consensually in the sex trade. Miss Jayne, it's my own body, it's my choice. The psychological effects were similar on both. Low self-esteem. Miss Jayne, what else am I going to do? Who else? Like, what else would someone hire me for? Right?
Yeah.
What else am I good for? The depression, the anxiety, the PTSD, because we already talked about some buyers are innately violent because that's part of the fun. So I don't want, any kid, particularly my trans youth that I'm working with, to be pulled into the sex trade. And when you decriminalize something, you expand it, you create a marketplace for it, and all of these sudden, all these vulnerable people get caught up. Some of them will be caught up by being trafficked, and some will just be heavily recruited and encouraged and won't fit the legal definition of trafficked, but they will just be sold false promises. You're going to make so much money. You're going to be able to pay for school. Da, 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 da. And once you do it, it is so hard to get out. So for those of you who are thinking that it's good for LGBTQ people, maybe it's good for the middle-aged trans sex worker, but it is not good for LGBT youth. It is not good. Getting in the sex trade when you are not already in it sets you up for a lifetime of depression, financial issues, abuse, exploitation. That is not the way to go. And that's why the equality model bill is not decriminalizing. It's not arresting people who are, the people being sold. If they're not a victim themselves, they're a vulnerable person, they're a marginalized person, they're not hurting anyone. It's getting after the people who are doing the harm. Again, repeating myself, but if audience member learns one thing, it's that if there were no sex buyers, there would be no human trafficking. So why would we all of a sudden legally allow sex buying? Why would we do that?
Jayne, I've always, I never understood that argument. Like, oh, it's good for the LGBTQ. We can't do anything else. I always was like, well, shouldn't we be helping them get educated or partner with job opportunities? And then I never got a response. Nobody could ever respond back to that argument. They just don't say anything when you tell them, no, I think we could do a little better for them. Not that.
Yeah.
So many issues here. Jayne, I'm just so honored to work alongside you. We're going to build this. How do you want the public to get involved? What do you need from them?
So a few things. There is, I don't know if you could share the QR code at some point there is an individual sign-on saying that you're in support of this. That is, and then you will get access to our newsletter. That's the minimum though. The more helpful thing is to really help get the message out, right? Yes. If you live in New York State and you can figure out who your state senator is and your state assembly member is, it's not that difficult. You Google New York State Assembly, New York State Senate, put it in your zip code. You will find out who your representatives are. Email them that the equality model is the way to go, that full decrim is horrible for communities. You can reach out to us and we can help you craft those emails. You can join us on lobby days, right? So, I think the first thing to do is sign up so you get our newsletter.
You get the information and all. No, don't worry, Jayne. I'm having all this in the body of the video. It's going to have all the links, house.gov, senate.gov. It's going to be there because we need to take actions from the public.
Right. And we need people to get involved. We have an organizational sign-on. So if you're a member of a church, a community group, a synagogue, a mosque, a library association, anyone who could be, we're happy to do presentations for them. Because we need to show legislators, unfortunately, in the age of social media, smaller groups are very, very vocal and very loud, right? So we need to show them that most people in New York State don't agree with the people shouting on social media, sex work is work. So we need your name, but we also need you to help get organizations involved so you can come to lobby days. Follow us on all of our social media. We need, we have this great videos.
Yes.
Follow, share, and Lynn, if you could put all of that in.
Oh, I definitely will. I share on a continual basis. I just put out again the Terry Crews video because I want men and boys to know, we're talking about you too, even though primarily we talk about girls and women and that's who it affects. No, there's a lot of boys and men. It's a continual sharing of information, getting the facts and truths out there, the reality. And although we're talking, Jayne, about, New York State, this is all over the country, we should point out. So although we're working on lobby day for New York and all that, this is coming to a neighborhood near you. You have to know what's going on, talk to the young people, get involved, see what's happening in your state, in your community. And always, again, it's going to be in the body of the video to reach out because we are more than willing to help direct you, answer questions, because we want you to be safe.
Yeah.
Right, Jayne?
And let me leave you with this. It is, people used to think it's like a problem. You had to go to India or whatever, or you had to go.
Yeah.
No, it happens right here in the US, not just New York City. It happens in every city and every town, right? Because all human trafficking is forced prostitution or prostitution under the age of 18, and sex buyers like them young. So it's happening in your community, even if it's a small community. So we need to gather the warriors. We need to multiply our numbers en masse, and show the world that while there, some group of people out there screaming sex work is work, that they are not the vast majority of us. They're just loud.
Well, I'm gonna answer those final words, Jayne, with we just have to get a little louder. I like to punch back appropriately, as I like to say. So we need warriors to join up with us to become loud, again, appropriately, backed up with the facts and the truths, which we have on our side.
Yeah.
So that's what people have to understand. Just because you see people on TV or in print or online yelling out loud doesn't mean it's true or factual. But you have to follow equalitymodelnewyork.org. Again, I'm going to have all the information, make it very easy. You'll click on a link. You're going to find out how you sign on if you're an organization, an individual, and also how you can put your thinking caps on and join us because we need all of you across New York State. Again, though, a reminder, this is happening across the United States. So you got to be aware of what's happening. We don't want our youth growing up thinking you could be in a window perhaps and sold to some strange man or woman, sex spying. That is not normal. That is not right. We are standing up together. Again, it's bipartisan issues, human rights abuses. We're having none of it, right, Jayne? You are.
None of it.
We are having none of it. I mean, it's just not happening in New York State. It's just not, but equalitymodelnewyork.org is the website. Jayne Bigelsen, you are terrific. I am so honored to know you and share your expertise and voice. And I send you warrior powers. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for all you do.
Oh, compared to you, because I learn from you. I consider you like a mentor to learn the facts, to learn, what the kids are thinking, and that our precious children and young people are worth so much more than any of this nonsense. So again, Jayne, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for the work you do. And thank you for being that, I'm going to call you the chief warrior in New York. Don't tell everybody else we know, though. So, but
I am not. But my colleagues and I, including you, we are together.
So well, you know what? I'm going to rephrase that because I don't want people mad at me. I'm going to say Equality Model, the coalition, the group as a whole. Those are the chief warriors in New York State.
Yes.
And Jayne, I look forward to seeing you on Lobby Day, which will be rolling around soon.
I can't wait. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a great day. We'll talk again soon because there's a lot of issues to talk about. Jayne Bigelsen, thank you so much. You are a warrior.